Welcome. I'm Jeremiah Reiner, and this is the Deeply Rooted Podcast. Hi there. Welcome back to the Deeply Rooted Podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you haven't done so already, make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel and through Apple Podcasts. Subscribe. Make sure you give us a like. And if you're really generous, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a review. That's a great way to get the word out about the Deeply Rooted Podcast. Also, as always, word of mouth. Nothing's going to beat that as far as promotion. So if you know somebody that might be interested or other people that would benefit from what we're doing here at the podcast, please share that with them on your social media. That's the best way to get that out there. If you want to email us, you can do that at drigw18@gmail.com. You can also head on over to our website. That's deeplyrootedconference.org. All kinds of blog posts on there. We've got all of the archived episodes that'll lead you to our YouTube channel. This past year's conference has already been posted on there, so if you didn't get a chance to attend and would like to hear those sessions, those are all posted as well. And we've got upcoming ministry schedule that we should be posting pretty soon once the calendar year is established. And speaking of that, that is our episode today. We've been doing this for the last couple of years, just kind of things to keep our eye on in the upcoming year. 2024 is closing out, and Lord willing, 2025 is right on the cusp for us. So if you're probably hearing this, Happy New Year, because my guess is we'll drop this after January 1st. So congratulations, you've made it that far. But we've got, let's see here, I've got about 18 things. And man, for the OCD crowd, they're dying right there. They're saying, why not 20? Why not 25? Well, we come up with 18. That's what we've got. But we do have a bonus one at the end, so stay with us. That's what we like to call a teaser, I guess, in radio and podcast world. So hang tight. Don't rush to the end. Don't fast forward. We'll get it to you momentarily. But I just want to run down a couple of these things for us to keep an eye on here in the upcoming year. Some of these are early on. Some of these are later in the year. Some of these occur all around the world. So a lot of these are right here at home. These are in no particular order, just as I've got them here in front of me. But let's go ahead and fire away here. Number one, things to keep an eye on in 2025. We've got an inauguration coming up. We just voted in President Trump back in November. He's going to be the 47th president, so he's number 45 and number 47. That inauguration is going to take place January 20th. He and his vice president to be J.D. Vance, he's a senator from Ohio, have won the election. And it looks like Chief Justice, John Roberts will probably do the swearing in that day around noon, according to the Constitution. So that should be a big day in America. And my guess is massive security will be up there in Washington, D.C. But that'll be all over television and probably the world as we see President Trump for his second term. This will be the last time he can run, according to the Constitution. So let's keep an eye on that, and we'll speak more about that as we get into some of these. But number two here, changing directions completely. First time ever a 12-team playoff in NCAA football. That's interesting. We've had 4 recently over the last few years, and now we've upped it to 12. We've already played a couple of the rounds. First round was December 20th. Second round was there on December 31st, New Year's Eve. It's going to be played on January 1st. The Final Four is scheduled for January 9th and 10th. And then they're going to have a championship game down there on January 20th in Atlanta. I bring all that up because it's big business right now. They've even got some lawsuits kind of lingering over NCAA in general about NIL, name, image, and likeness, paying players. There's a lot going on right now in secondary education / athletics. So keep an eye on that. There's a ton of money to either be made, lost, shared, exchanged. So we'll see the ramifications for that. We're early on into it. Don't know what that's going to look like as far as downstream effects, but certainly something to keep an eye on as we start mixing in massive pay for college athletes. Number 3, this one might affect you more than you realize, or maybe your teenager, or really, I don't know. There's a lot of people that are involved in this, but as of now, According to the deadline, that would be January 10th, technically, TikTok, that's right, the social media app, is scheduled to be banned in the United States. In the spring of 2024, President Biden passed legislation that TikTok would be banned in America as of January 2025 if the Chinese parent company known as ByteDance does not sell it. Now, January 19th is the deadline for the sale, but the Supreme Court has actually stepped in sort of last minute and agreed to hear the case on January 10th. I think that's why it's the important date. So ByteDance, the parent company, as I mentioned, the Chinese company, is arguing that it's a free speech violation, whereas the president and his counsel, so to speak, and others obviously of Congress who've passed this, they voted in favor of the legislation because they believe it to be a national security threat. So we'll see how the Supreme Court handles that decision. Again, that's January 10th. If they vote in favor of President Biden's legislation, then we'll see a ban on the app coming January 19th, technically. So that'll be interesting to see how that affects folks and really so many businesses. You've got quote-unquote influencers that are making substantial money off of this app. But there's a lot of worry, apparently, in the federal government that this might actually be compromised. So we'll see how that all shakes out in the future. Number 4, speaking of the federal government, Doge. So I think some people want to pronounce this Dodge. I'm not really sure why. That was a truck. But what we're looking at here is DOGE. Stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. This is supposedly going to be enacted under the Trump administration. Trump said this in a quote, "It will become potentially the Manhattan Project of our time." Now, that's big talk. Just for history reference, I do think that's kind of funny because the Manhattan Project was completely secret. So apparently no secret here about Doge, but he's tapped Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to be heading up the project. And that's actually what it is. It's not an actual department. It's more of an advisory group directly linked to the president. Both Musk and Ramaswamy are not federal employees. They're volunteers, and they've offered their service to, for lack of a better term, basically streamline the government spending. So we're looking at cuts and major cuts, actually. Musk himself has stated that he believes he can save the government at least $2 trillion. That is staggering. That would be roughly a third of the government's annual spending. So there is a deadline, though. Doge will expire on July 4th of 2026. So that's very important to remember. So they basically have 2 years to be working on this, and we'll see what they get to the bottom of. I know there's a lot of members of Congress that have been asked to be a part of this as well, so we'll see where those cuts come from. Folks, $2 trillion would be a massive, massive help in government efficiency, so keep your eyes and ears open for that. Again, that's DOGE, D-O-G-E, Department of Government Efficiency, heading our way in 2025. For number 5 on our list, we're actually going to be looking at some anniversaries this year. This is going to mark the 80th year anniversary of the end of World War II. Lots of things there in 1945, the VE Day celebration, victory over Europe, as well as VJ Day. You've also got the atomic bombs being set off there in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 80 years ago, 1945. Hard to believe it's been that long. We've also got a couple of tech anniversaries this year. 50-year anniversary for the founding and beginning of Microsoft, started there by Bill Gates. As a matter of fact, next year, 1976, will mark a 50-year anniversary for us in 2026 for the 50-year anniversary of Apple. So that'll be next year. But this year, we're celebrating Microsoft. And how about this, TV fans, 100-year anniversary of the first successful transmission of television pictures with a grayscale done by John L. Baird. So that's 100 years old, 1925, in October of that year, our very first television picture transmitted. Fascinating. Number 6, not so much good news here. The Ukraine and Russia conflict continues to rage. This has been going on since 2014, in February of that year. You've got tens of thousands of casualties, hundreds of thousands of people wounded. The ending, we don't know, but this is the reason I bring it up. President Trump claims that he is going to attempt to settle the conflict soon, and reports are to do that, I believe, early on in the beginning of his administration, so we'll see about that. Certainly that would be a good thing to see that come to an end. I know the people on both sides there, particularly the citizens, would love that, but we'll see how that all pans out because there's a lot of ground to be exchanged, lost, gained, however you want to say that, and the agreement will be very, very interesting if and when they are possibly able to make that happen. So keep an eye out for that situation in Ukraine and Russia and how our administration coming in may play a bigger role in that. I bring that up as well because the government also just literally released another massive amount of money aid to the Ukrainians in the form of billions and billions of dollars again. So we'll see. Something certainly to be paying attention to. Here's another situation around the world to be looking at. Number 7 here, the situation in Syria. Bashar al-Assad, who was outed as president, he's on the run. The rebels who have sort of overtaken there at this point in time, and it's kind of a hodgepodge. This is sort of a free-for-all right now with different factions racing for control there in Syria. So you have to be careful about the news you're getting and who actually is attempting to overtake that area. You've got terrorist organizations, certainly you've got citizens, you've got rebel groups, and I'm confident you've also got large nations at play here, including the United States, who are heavily involved and definitely paying attention to the situation going on there. But the rebels even released countless prisoners from their prisons not long after they had outed President Assad. So right now, Syria in a really desperate situation. So keep them in mind. We'll see how that all pans out going forward. So number 8, speaking of foreign policy, here's a man that's got a rich history in it, or at least his family does. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be nominated by President Trump for the director, not of foreign policies, but of health and human services. He spent a significant amount of time as a lawyer, particularly battling big pharma, big agriculture. I think that's probably the 2 major targets on his list if and when he becomes the director of health and human services. I know he's preached heavily about getting America healthy again. He's also got some interesting takes on vaccines that I think will be it'll just be very fascinating to see how this all shakes out and if he's able to get any legislation passed, what kind of changes may be coming down the pipe. Certainly, we can all agree that America is extremely unhealthy, so we're hoping and praying that this could work out for the best, and we'll see. But again, that's Robert Kennedy Jr., number 8 here, nominated by President Trump for Director of Health and Human Services. So let's be paying attention to what might happen in the pharmaceutical, agricultural industries, food in America. Should be a very fascinating turn of events. Number 9, speaking of America, major immigration reform looking like it's on the way here. President Trump has nominated Tom Homan as the new quote-unquote border czar. Homan's an ex-police officer, and he's a former acting United States, and I want to get this correct here, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director. You know that better as ICE, I-C-E. So he's got a rich history here, part of immigration reform. He's described immigration at the United States border as, quote, the biggest national security vulnerability this nation has seen since 9/11, and we have to fix it. So we are looking right now at tens of millions of illegal immigrants in this country. Obviously, everybody with somewhat of a different story, some of those extreme threats, some of those just simply people seeking refuge and asylum and help and aid in any way they can. So there'll be a lot of sorting out once he takes over there. So I think that'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they combat. I know for certain that Holman has mentioned basically 3 areas that he's wanting to get involved in. Number 1, they want to secure both borders, being southern and northern. Secondly, they want to basically try to tackle and arrest, suspend, and completely eradicate the cartel out of the United States and even some of our neighboring countries. And then third, and just as important, he's also mentioned that he wants to combat child trafficking and human trafficking in general. I don't want to limit that to children, but certainly those are on our prayers first and foremost. So I think it's going to be a tall task, but it's certainly something we need to turn our attention to. So major immigration reform, number 9. A little bit more lighthearted on these next couple here. Number 10, there's an animated film coming out this year called The King of Kings. It's set to release, according to all the research we've done, in April of 2025. It's based on the old Charles Dickens posthumous short story that he wrote. It was later published after his death. It's called The Life of Our Lord. And the film, very similar to the short story, follows Charles Dickens and his son Walter as they sort of bond over their discovery of the life of Jesus. It basically works its way through the life of Christ. So that could be very interesting. There's a lot of people have been touting this. This is going to be produced by a South Korean company. So without a lot of American involvement and so-called Hollywood, we'll see just how strict they stick to the scriptures. So there's a lot of talk that this could be very positive. Could be a great tool to use. So we'll see. Again, King of Kings coming out April 2025. So we'll try to watch that one and see what we can come up with there for you. If you and your family check it out, send us an email. Tell us what you thought about it if you get a chance to see it. And speaking of that, here's another one that a little bit more controversial, though. Number 11, apparently Mel Gibson's up to it again. They are tapping The Passion of the Christ Resurrection. That's the technical name of the film right now, the sequel. So if you're familiar with The Passion of the Christ, which was released back in 2004, this is supposedly going to be released also around Easter. Now, that's the tentative date. There's a lot of rumor and speculation this might have to be backed up due to production issues, but April 2025, much like the previous film that I mentioned. So Passion of the Christ Resurrection. Now, it's worth noting Mel is directing and producing again. And if you're familiar with Mel, he is, very popular in Hollywood over the years, but he's extremely devout Catholic. So we'll see their portrayal here. I think this one could get a little hairy. There was rumor that there was basically two completely different scripts written for this and really going in either directions about how to handle it. So be very careful about this one. I think it's got potential to be, I'm going to use the word rough in the sense that just probably taking a lot of liberty. Don't know that. So we'll all just kind of hold our breath and see how that pans out. But it is coming out. There is a sequel. So we'll see. That is basically centered around the resurrection and ascension of the Lord. So number 12, we're going back to politics here. As a matter of fact, these next few, very important to pay attention to this year. Germany's election. This is scheduled for February 23rd. And the reason we bring it up is the federal elections in Germany are going to be held on that date in 2025 to elect all 630 members of their 21st, what they call Bundestag. That's a nice way of saying basically their parliament. Now, this was originally scheduled for the 28th of September, but the elections were brought forward. They were rushed because the entire dissolving body of parliament came out. It's been what we refer to as a snap election. It's just a rushed election where the parliament is suspended. All seats will be voted on. This is the fourth snap election in the history of Germany since World War II. And so those previously were 1972, 83, and then again in 2005. So it's a pretty significant deal. There could be massive government overturn in Germany. That's why we're bringing this up. So the whole really trajectory of this nation could change substantially based on this election. Again, that's going to be on the 23rd of February, so right around the corner in the beginning of 2025. Another major election is going to happen down in Australia. These are also going to be federal. May 17th, they're going to be voting for their Senate, and then September 27th, they'll be voting on their House and their Parliament. That's 150 seats up for voting. Australia, over the last couple of years, extremely liberalized. I thought if you looked at the news much and was paying attention to it, COVID and post-COVID era for Australia was handled so poorly. Lots of mistrust in government, lots of issues there between citizens and leaders. We'll see how this pans out. Australia, a once, what many would refer to as a semi-Christian nation, certainly far leaning to the left now and racing in that direction. So we'll see what happens there. This could be a positive turnaround for them, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. And again, two separate elections, May 17th for their upper house Senate, September 27th for their lower house in their parliament. And last but not least, another parliament major election, number 14 here. This is going to be the Canadian election. October 20th was the original date, but right now, and this can change quickly, it looks like that could come much sooner, and very similar to Germany, a snap election could be put into place simply because it seems to be unraveling heavily there in the Canadian Parliament. Justin Trudeau, the current Prime Minister, who has been in the news substantially over the last handful of years, and not for good reasons, looks to be on the way out. Terribly low numbers in the polls right now, increasing frustrations from Canadian citizens, members of Parliament. This doesn't look good. There was a recent meeting between he and President Trump. Seemed to go a little dicey. Some comments were made or not made, supposedly. It didn't look like things were handled in so much friendly cooperation. I think Trump was probably aware that Mr. Trudeau was probably on the way out. I think Trudeau probably realizes that. And so they're sort of scrambling right now, particularly the Parliament. So do not be shocked if that October 20th date for these federal elections is quickly moved up, and we'll see not only many new members of Parliament, but certainly probably a brand new Prime Minister for the people of Canada. So something interesting, and I tie that in because we mentioned immigration policy. We're going to be working heavily with the northern border there with the Canadians. So this could be a big deal going forward as to who the new leadership there is, with our new leadership coming in as well. Number 15, looking more globally, on June 24th through the 26th in the Netherlands. First time ever they're going to hold the NATO summit there in the Netherlands. Since its beginning in 1949, the Netherlands has never been able to host this. We bring it up for this reason. There's a lot of talk, particularly in the Trump administration, and he has been on record as saying this, that potentially the United States could withdraw itself from NATO or substantially pull back funding. And the other question that looms over that has been there for a few years is, will the Ukrainians be admitted into NATO? I know that the Trump administration has been against that. It goes back years before, talking about how the NATO nations would not extend further into the east. This has a lot to do with what's going on right now with the Ukrainians and the Russians and where that NATO line is drawn. Bringing in Ukraine would be a massive step, and I think many people concerned with foreign policy would probably see that as a negative. But again, I do think it's on the table. Pay attention. Will the United States withdraw itself from NATO, these long-standing alliances that we've had for all these years? Something major to be looking at. Again, that's June 24th through the 26th in the Netherlands. Number 16, this one's fascinating, especially considering how our government operates a little bit differently. But Mexico right now is going to be having a Supreme Court vote. Earlier in 2024, Mexico's Congress passed legislation that required all federal judges to be elected by popular vote. How about that? Instead, they had been voted on before by their Senate, and that had been the previous law. Well, that's changed now, and now it's up for popular election. And the reason this is a big deal is 8 of those 11 justices that are on the court have already written letters saying they're not going to run for election, and they will resign if this comes to pass. They are furious with this decision. The 3 other remaining have said they would campaign for election. The popular vote is scheduled to begin in June. Here's the interesting thing I found about this, though. There are requirements for this and a substantial number of people that are running. So to summarize it as best I can, to be a candidate for the Supreme Court in Mexico in this new law, you have to be only having a law degree. You have to have a grade point average of at least 3.2. 5 years of professional experience, and you have to have 5 letters of recommendation from neighbors or friends. That's how it's actually drawn up. And here's the wild part. There are over 18,000 people that have put their names in for the running, but that is going to be a random draw to narrow down the number for who actually gets on the ballot. So many people have argued that this could be very shady, that this could be corrupted. I know some of the justices who sit on the court now, some of those 8, that has been their major argument, that this could completely ruin the election system because too much tampering. We'll see. We don't know that. But I do think that's fascinating. 18,000 people, got to narrow it down, got to have a law degree, grade point average of 3.2, 5 years experience, and 5 letters of recommendation from neighbors or friends. So we'll see how all that shakes out. But again, popular voting for their Supreme Court justices. Number 17, as we're narrowing it down here, Hurricane Helene recovery. And boy, were we rocked by this in the Southeast back in the fall this year. Just a terrible tragedy that we could not have seen coming, the likes of which I don't think anybody in our lifetime has ever seen anything like this. Flooding damage, tree damage, power outages, you name it, bridges, roads, houses, everything imaginable, just completely annihilated. In desperate need still of housing and food, children and churches both alike struggling right now. North Carolina alone, which was hit substantially by this, particularly western North Carolina, the state government estimates that Helene damaged more than 73,000 homes. According to one pastor who was interviewed, Sam Burleson of Covenant Community Church there in Asheville, North Carolina, he quoted as saying, "We currently have 1,207 children in the Macomb County school system who are without a home." That is just an awful, staggering number. East Tennessee, parts of Georgia, Florida, still heavily affected as well. So if you're looking to get involved in something this year, your church, you individually, there is still plenty to do there. So if you want to put boots on the ground and get involved, giving, building, donating, you name it, across the board, they are still in need. I know here in East Tennessee and parts of Unicoi County and different areas, Irwin could still use massive help. There were a few areas in Southwest Virginia, I know Damascus and other places that could use some help, but particularly Western North Carolina, unbelievably damaged by this hurricane. So if you're looking for something in 2025 to be a part of, please understand there is a great need still in this area for aid, so that recovery from that. But again, that's number 17. Number 18 here, technically our last one, it's a lawsuit. And right here in Bristol, Virginia, just right next door to where I live, there is an abortion facility. The owners of that building that houses the clinic is known as Bristol Women's Health. The owners of the building have unsuccessfully sued the clinic owner in an attempt to basically oust the business. They are making the case that they were not aware that this is what they were going to be using that for. They felt like that there was fraud or lying committed by the leaders there, the Bristol Women's Health, the clinic owners. Of course, the clinic owners are arguing back against that. The building owner appealed and lost that in the State Court of Appeals. It was dismissed recently, and so that was handed down in September of 2024 by the Bristol Circuit Judge Sage Johnson. The owners of the building are going to appeal again. So let's be in prayer about that. This is one of the only abortion facilities in the surrounding area here for East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia. Tennessee has extremely more clamped down laws on these things, whereas Virginia is much more open. And so you'll see people coming from all over, really, and I mean that literally, all over to this facility. We've got good friends that are constantly there protesting, preaching, trying to win souls and help save the lives of these children. It's a substantial effort, and this lawsuit could potentially be an answer to that prayer. So be in prayer about that for this facility there in Bristol. Be in prayer for those that are going there trying to aid and preach and help and give and donate and everything that you could possibly do to help save the lives of those children and those women, and preaching good news to them that there is a better way. And so continue to pray about that, but that's in Bristol, Virginia. That should be coming up this year. Don't know the exact date on the appeal. Again, that could be heard at any time, so we'll try to pass news along there for you when and if we hear something. Now, that's all 18, but we have a bonus one, so we don't want to leave you hanging here. One final thing in 2025, Deeply Rooted Conference 2025. This is going to be November 7th and 8th. We're going to be location to be determined right now. I'm sure there's probably some specific ideas, but we'll give you more on that later on. But the theme this year is going to be Sanctification by Grace Alone. There's already a couple of speakers lined up. We've got Anthony Mathenia, we've got Cameron Dula, we've got Jeffrey Perry, all lined up to be speaking at this year's conference. Again, that's November 7th and 8th. If you weren't at last year's, as I mentioned before, you can go ahead and head on over to our website. That'll take you to our YouTube channel. All of the previous episodes are on there. And if you want to, you can go ahead and grab tickets. Early bird registration. Just head on over to the website. Up there at the top right-hand corner, you'll see a tab. Just click there, and that'll take you exactly where you need to go to purchase those tickets. Anybody under 18 is free. So if you know some students, maybe you have children, just let us know. We'd love to have them as well. Rates are extremely cheap, I promise you, compared to any other conference. This is going to be wildly more affordable. Great time to get together with local people of like-mindedness, fellowship, sing, hear some good preaching and teaching, get to network with some people that you may not be aware of. We always have vendors and booths there for book sales and all types of different ministries. If you would like to help sponsor, you can do that. Just email us again, drigw18@gmail.com. You can also email the Deeply Rooted Conference as well if you'd like to do that. And so we'd be glad to talk to you about any way you can support, help, if you'd like to be a part of it. Maybe even setting up, if you've got a ministry there that you want to talk to us about to support that. We'd love to have you a part of that. But again, Deeply Rooted Conference 2025, November 7th and 8th. And so, ladies and gents, that is everything we need to be looking forward to in 2025. I'm sure there's countless other items that I could have mentioned. If you've got them, send them to us. We'll try to get the word out about that. But don't forget, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, give us a review, share it with other people. We'd love to hear from you, so email us, check out our website, and be sure to follow us on social media. And until next time, we love you guys and hope you have a great week in Jesus.